Chwalony Jezus Chrystus.
Christ bless you. Hello everyone. On the third day of the Congress of Three Seas Theologians, an international theological congress, today we'll be covering the topic of theology of human being. The first panel of today has a question mark at the end. So, are we expecting, do we want a redefinition of a family? I'd like to ask Father Pro-Dean, Father Professor Mirosław Brzeziński, PhD, who will have the pleasure of inviting the panelists, as well as introducing them. Good morning, everyone. On the next day of our Congress, today we will be discussing a redefinition of family, or we'll ask a question if family should be redefined. But let's remember, we are part of a Congress that is about theology and faith closer to us. The first part of the proceedings will be more about theology, knowledge, discovering the truth about what family is. But if we are to discover that, we need to discover what the foundation of family is, which is marriage. But to discover this truth, we need to look deeper for the truth about a human being and what a human being really is. I'd like to remind you of the letter to families by John Paul II. Every person is a product of a family, so that then they can start a family and fulfill their vocation. In the letter to families, Saint John Paul II pointed to the first vocation of a human being, and he said the first and foremost vocation of a human being is to be a human. To be a human in line with what humanity is, and in line with other gifts and talents that were bestowed upon us by God. Therefore, we'll be trying to discover the truth about being human, to discover the truth about marriage, and understand the truth about family, to welcome it, to accept it by our minds, and to accept it with our faith, because science and faith is about the discovery of the truth. And in this provocative title, Redefining Family, with a question mark, we'll be trying to get to the bottom of the idea of the identity of a human being, identity of marriage, and identity of a family. We will pose questions as to why we should and why it's worth it to defend the identity, so that it isn't redefined or misconstrued or misrepresented, and what affects the way of perceiving this basic social unit of family and the basic surroundings in which human being operates, which is family. Maybe not all of you know, but in the morning the media learned about the death of Wanda Pułtawska, a great defender of human life. But at the same time, she was a great defender of the institution of marriage and family. She may be looking down upon us from heavens and dictate some of our thoughts so that they point us closer to the truth. Our panelists will be tasked with attempting to answer the questions. Father Professor Željko Talnić, who I'd like to welcome to take the floor and take his seat at the stage. And let me introduce the other guests, the other panelists, so that then we can start our discussion. Father Professor did his PhD degree at the theological faculty at the Gregorian University, and now he's a rector of Catholic University in Croatia. He is head of the university. He's a professor and head of the Department of Fundamental Theology at the Theological Faculty at the University of Zagreb, and a member of International Theological Committee, author of numerous publications in dogmatic theology as well as theology of marriage and theology of family. I'd like to welcome and introduce and invite Professor Małgorzata Duda from the Pontificate University of John Paul II in Kraków, pro-rector. The scientific work and research areas are the problems dealing with the family and the social surrounding of a family, preventative activities against creation of groups in danger of exclusion. We're happy to welcome you today, mainly because your research area, your area of expertise, is very much in line with the topic of this very panel. I would also like to welcome Father Dr. Wojciech Kuczko, the chaplain of Płock Diocese, the alumni of the University in Rome, Pro-Dean for Students' Affairs, Department of Studies on Family of the Stefan Wyszyński University in Kraków, and a lecturer of seminar in Płock. Father Doctor is known to a lot of us. He's an eminent ethics teacher and moral teacher, and he's been working and supporting Płock Curia in terms of pastoral care for family. So he is also very close to the topic at hand. Today's meeting will be as follows. Each of the guests will have 10 to 12 minutes maximum to present their topic, to give their presentation. Afterwards, we'll have a chance to ask questions and for the panelists to have a discussion. And in the end, a Q&A session. The topic we're covering today concerns all of us. All of us are a product of a family, and we see this topic being addressed in the public sphere, in the media. So I encourage you to think of questions and then voice your questions. If you don't happen to have any, I have my own questions to ask at the end. Some questions may be a bit provocative, but I hope that most of the questions come from you, the audience. This is all from me, and I'd like to ask Father Professor Željko Tanić to give the first presentation. Good morning, everyone.
Thank you very much for these introductional remarks. I always said it's not my first time being in Lublin. That is so pity that we as Slavic people have to communicate in English. But unfortunately, I don't speak Polish. So I'm going to say a few words in English, and also you have to forgive me if I'm taking a little bit more time, because it's also not my mother tongue, so it's not always easy to express itself in English. So, and I have my tool also to see what I wrote in English. Okay. As already mentioned, I'm a fundamental theologian, and I'm not expert in moral theology. And somebody could ask, what has to do fundamental theology with families? But my thesis is not my original one. Actually, I would mention two people, maybe two different people. And one of them first is Pope Francis. If you remember, maybe in 2019, he delivered an address to Curia on Christmas, and he wrote also Veritatis Gaudium, among others. And he said two things. We are living in a change of epoche. We are not in epochal changes. We are not in the time of epochal changes. We are in the change of epoch. Those are two very different things. And what he said in Veritatis Gaudium is that we are living in a completely change of an anthropological and socio-economical and socio-cultural and environmental situation. This situation asks also from us Christians to reconsider many things and not be sure that only if we are changing clothes that we are going to do what is necessary to do. The question is how to understand those changes. What is this change of epoche? What could we consider? The second author is Olivier Roy. He's a French philosopher. He works in Italy, and he wrote 2 years ago a book, Is Europe Still Christian? And his thesis is that what happened, what you already know, in 1968, this famous year, I was born, Dad, completely changed our not only view on politics of social issues, but completely changed our anthropology and completely changed families. His thesis, he says in one very, very interesting sentence that he would like to compare 68 with Luther's time. He would say that 95 theses brought by Luther had the same impact on our society and the church as 68, and that we are still not enough aware of the changes that occurred after 68, and they're still ongoing. What is the biggest change? And maybe another point to say. And then he said, and that's interesting, that's my point, before 68, church and society divided only on two matters. Where is the source of authority? And who has the last authority? We would say revelation and Pope and church magisterium. And society would say natural law or a parliament, and would say government has the last sentence to say. But we were all realing of natural law, that what we had in common is natural law. Even most opposed societies to the church had the same attitude toward natural law. And that was the basis of all society. But what happened after 68? After 68, we lost this common ground. We don't have anymore this common ground. Because 68 tried to shape a society on the basis of desire and the basis of my self-understanding. I am my own project. There is nothing at the basis of values of society, of anything. So the problem is that church and society today, we speak on two different levels. Even though we pretend to be at the same level. That's maybe the reason that I say, because my thesis was on Vatican II, that Vatican II came too late, all too early. Because Vatican II came at the end of one process of mutual fight between church and society. We wanted to make a peace with modernity, which is good. But modernity based also on natural law. And it was everything fine until 68. This idea break apart, but not now from the church, but from the society once again. So, if we are talking about family values, if we are talking about all the changes, I think that we have to take into consideration this big change. What Pope says is change of epoch, and maybe that we are not that we have to find new. I don't say that we have to change, but just this understanding, and that's my contribution, I would say, to this conference, that we have to think that there is something beyond, something more deep. What is dividing today society maybe and our church attitude towards society and towards family and family values in the society and the church, because the problems are much more deeper than we can maybe understand them. And I would like not to bother you too much. Okay, that's, as I said, my fundamental thesis is that today, with all our efforts to find common ground, it's very difficult to do that. We have to be aware of that, because we are going now out of completely different positions. Until 68, that was not the case, as I said. We had the basis of natural law, of many common understanding. But the question was only who has the last authority, not what is the basis of society. And at the end, I would like to finish with one Italian philosopher who is considered as being one of the best interpreter of Marx, but on the right side. That's interesting. He's going with the right. His name is Diego Fusaro. He's a very interesting guy. Okay, if you didn't read something from him, I recommend you to read that. He said, after 68, we tried to form a society on the principles of liberalism and libertinism, which strives for additional value and additional pleasure. And he said, at the same time, the analogy between neo-libertarian society and the form of neo-libertarian erotica becomes more and more clear with a deeper analysis. And that's final quote. From the point of view of libertarianism, society does not spring from the natural common essence of man and from the very foundation of ethics, but from the egoistic interests of mutual competing atoms that relate to each other with the aim of maximizing their own personal interests. Everything that is not in accordance with this vision is negatively marked on different ways. At the same time, from a neo-libertine perspective, connection with Eros do not arise from the search for the family union as the basis of an ethical life centered on dual unity and on the love synthesis achieved by the birth of children. That's the fact. And that's how today's society preserved family and relations. Okay, nothing is lost. But I think also that when we are talking about theology and our theological church approach to that issue, that we have to be aware of what's going on. But sometimes, and that's my final thesis, I think that we in the church are still before 68. That we think that we have common ground with our today's society. But that's not the fact. And 68, I have now 55 years. And that's a revolution that became law. And in its going process. Thank you very much.
Bardzo serdecznie.
Thank you very much for this presentation, and in particular for reflecting on the revolution of the sexual revolution in 1968. Following that, we probably had something that allowed the Western societies to return to the truth about men. We had the theology of body postulated by John Paul II. This allowed us to have a holistic, integral view on men, not only from the perspective of sexuality and the body. At the end of the 90s and at the beginning of 2000, the truth about men was somehow escaping our understanding. That's why I think we should pay attention to that and return to this topic with questions later. Some questions are already forming in my head. Now I would like Professor Małgorzata Duda to take the floor. Thank you very much for the introduction. He called me, inviting me to participate in this panel. I was a bit perplexed because I saw this title, Redefinition of Family. Maybe I'm a bit too impulsive, but I had to think about it. But then I was looking for this question mark. My background is sociology and theology. On the ground of theology, we've got the ecclesial teaching about society, about family. So this sociological background is very strong with me, and I'm actually quite pleased in hindsight. When talking about family, I was always thinking about the basis for the believers, for the Christians, and in particular for the Catholics, to think and reflect whether in the 21st century, in 2023, it is actually, it has ground, it is rational to pose such a question. Is there such a necessity? Someone may say, well, I'm trying to use here also modern technology in the context of presenting the results of some studies that some of you probably are familiar with concerning the statistics, concerning the approach of Poles and the believers, the Catholics, to family, how they perceive family. For many years already, the answer is that the family is the most important thing in people's life. The statistics change. It oscillates about 90% usually. But when we ask someone what they understand under this term, so what is the base of family? What is the essence of family? The answers differ. Of course, there are different forms of family. Nuclear family, consisting of parents, children. In the past, understood in a broader way, including also relatives, different generations. Today, rather, due to the atomization of life and the free movement of people, it's more difficult with that understanding of nuclear family. If it comes to physical contact, thanks to internet, for instance, we can be actually close to each other. So generally, we may also deem a family to be parents that bring up the children on their own, like single mothers, single fathers. We've got patchwork families, mixed forms of family. There is a whole spectrum. This includes also partnerships, the so-called homo families. And now we could ask, does it mean that today, in the space, around the space of this diversity of the views on family, and maybe the lack even of a definition of a family, but actually different approaches to understanding family, should we redefine this concept? A lot has been talked about in the area of science. Is there in historical space, but also in today's cultural space, is this diversity something negative? Or is it actually an advantage because it has always been? maybe 30 years ago, our understanding was different. Or maybe there was such an understanding that was translated into certain actions. There were no same-sex partnerships, there were no single-parent families, there were no large families, or there were large families, not 2+1 models, or do we have actually something new in the space in which we are living today? What can be new can be the demand put on us today, the demand to accept the different forms. Many researchers are using rather the idea of alternative forms of experiencing family life. If we ask sociologists to define family in one particular way, they say it's impossible. Sociologists say that we as people, also individual persons, need a point of reference. And this applies to everything. When we asked about the idea of legal form, we could also arrive at the same question. We need a point of reference that shows us, directs us in a particular development, whether we can accept something or not. Nowadays in Poland, especially in the recent years, after the beginning of the military operations in Ukraine, we can see around us many people with different cultural backgrounds. Not only people fleeing to us from the East, people who have different views, opinions on different matters. In Poland, we've got people from different continents. Those people bring different attitudes to family, they bring different values with them. So what is the proper approach to the concept of family? And when we think about mixed marriages with different cultures, what does it mean? So should the mother define family different than the father because they have different cultural backgrounds? I do it on purpose, so asking those questions. Because already in the beginning I said that I will try to reject such attempts. So the problem consists not in thinking about redefining the family. So I will agree with the previous speaker that we may have different approaches to that diversity. So certainly there is a change in how we see the family, but how we as believers, as Catholics, should actually approach this issue. Are we somehow divided? So our hearts and our brains actually send different signals, or maybe or not. Maybe that's not the essence of the problem. So that's why maybe we don't really need a redefinition of this family, of the notion of family. So I think this will be enough for a start. Thank you. Instead of acceptance, today we are talking rather of acceptance, of tolerance. So we will wait, of course, for the answers to this open question. But it seems that this demand, pressure exerted on us to accept something that we do not really accept, actually. Do I have to accept something that is contrary to my ideas, to my mind, something that I have learned and something that I know is not in line with the truth about man, with the truth about myself, because someone has a different understanding of that. And I will refer to the words expressed on the first day of our Congress, that the faith changes, transforms the reality. So the question is, what do I believe in? Do I believe in what I've learned empirically? So this is just a short comment to the talk delivered by Professor Duda. And now I am giving the floor to Father Dr. Wojciech Kućko. This will be an experience from two countries, from Poland and Italy. Both are actually quite close to me. Professor Kućko, Dr. Kućko will be talking about demography, which is changing, also in this Polish reality, in Italy, but actually all over Europe, due to different reasons. And we'll be thinking about different consequences of that phenomenon. The floor is yours.
No, włączenie, bo inny człowiek.
Go to the final computer. There's my presentation to be found. So thank you for inviting me to this meeting, to this Congress, giving me the opportunity to share a few thoughts of mine, reflections on demography. I wanted to present you with some data, some statistics that will allow us to realize the direction Europe is heading, the world is heading, and how the redefinition of family is taking place in terms of demography. The goal of my presentation is to show two states, Poland and Italy, and comparing statistical data from 2017 to 2022 from the Polish Central Statistical Office and Istituto Nazionale Statistica in Italy. And it seems like these two countries are heading the same way, are on the same path in terms of demography. Let's begin with Poland. 2017, an demographic atlas of Poland was published. It's a very interesting, comprehensive presentation of demography in our country, with a division into communes, provinces, voivodeships. It's interesting to look at it also for a priest, for a pastoral clergy, because it goes to show how our society is changing. The society that we are assisting with our priesthood. This is a pyramid of age in Poland, and it just goes to show how much it has changed. The year 1990 is a yellow line, so right is women, left is men, age from up until 100 years old, and in the year 1990, the number of children compared to the prognosis for 2040, twice as many children were born. And the forecast at that time was that there would be more children, that there would be fewer children and more elderly people. This is what the Central Statistical Office was saying would happen. The map of Europe, the darker the shade of blue, the bigger the decrease in the number of people in a given society. As we can see, the Central Europe, Southern Europe, faced decreases in population, millions of people. France, Great Britain, Spain, the Netherlands, an increase in the number of people. If you could dim the lights, please, we would be able to see it better. So, births and deaths compared to the year 2012 and 2022. The darker the shade, the more births and deaths is, again, goes to show how the demography is changing. How Poland is changing demographically in terms of the number of citizens. Here there are communes where the people over 65 years old in 2016 went over 20%, the map on the left, and on the right a forecast for 2030. Which communes where the number of people over the age of 65 will be over 20%. Here the pre-productive people before 2016, and on the right the prognosis for 2030. Cities will become centers where more pre-productive age citizens will dwell. The question may arise: will Slavs disappear? Slavic nations that I showed, will they go away as a result of wars, as a result of migrations? There will be nations where the future of families is under a question mark and is put to question. Its very existence. Why is it happening? And the previous speakers also pointed to the same idea, Father Professor, the question of sexual revolution. It's worth following a discussion that started in Więź periodical, a Polish periodical, started with the idea of the theology of the body and relationship revolution, according to Marcin Kędzierski. With this article, Kędzierski, opened a discussion, and a very important discussion. So what Father Professor has mentioned, the question of language, Theology of Body by John Paul II. Why didn't it become a way of reaching young people? Why didn't it become a way of convincing people that demography is in the hands of families and their children? Some more data, a statistical annual paper from, we can see marriages from 2010 to 2021. 2010, Poland, 228,000 marriages. 11 years later, 168,000 fewer marriages were started. And what's more, there are voivodeships, such as the Western Pomerania, where there are more civil marriages compared to church marriages. And the only thing you have to do is talk to priests and they will confirm it. They will confirm that fewer people are getting married in church. And also looking at parents of children in cities, in our Płock diocese, for 7.5 baptisms given, a third of them, sorry, 2/3 civilian, people with civil marriage, a third were parents who were not married at all, neither in church nor in the civil registry. Here, the reproductive rate, 2010, 1.375. In 2021, it dropped to 1.330. Another important factor impacting demography and the way of thinking demography, suicide attempts in Poland, noted by the police, reported to the police. In 2021, 130,000. And these are the reported cases of suicide attempts, and in reality there are more. Now going south to Italy. Italy, as you can see here, divided into communes. Blue color are communes where the elderly prevail, 64 to 85 years old. The orange are communes where the majority are the youth, 16 to 35 years old, this demographic group. So this is the state from 2022 in Italy. And it reflects what we see in Poland. 2019 in Italy, this was the first year since 1978 when they started reporting and collecting data on marriages. There were more civil marriages than church marriages for the first time in 40 years in Italy. 70.3% marriages where at least one person who is not from Italy. And from 2016 onwards, there is a possibility to enter single-sex relationships, partnerships, and 2,808, and year by year, 2,000 same-sex marriages, partnerships are entered in Italy. And you can see here from 2008, total number of marriages, 2008, 250 almost marriages, 280, 195,000 marriages. and these used to be majority, is now civil marriages. Are we dealing with what Francesco Agostino called post-family society? A society where especially young people who build up this creative class that impacts what is shown around us. Are these young people really moving away from traditional model of marriage in favor of living on their own, or cohabiting without any formal relationship, marriage? And both societies, as we see, are heading that direction. What are the ethical challenges, which is the most important part of my presentation? What are the challenges? In 30 years, 70% of the citizens of the world and Europe will be living in cities. It shows us that the traditional model of family upbringing will be slowly disappearing, because traditional society was based, after all, on what was happening in villages. Cities strive for modernity. The villages were the mainstay of tradition. It doesn't mean that the traditional family will go away completely, but we need to realize the changes. And for us priests, it's important that we focus our activities in cities and around cities. Pope Francis speaks about that at great length. He says cities are a challenge in the way we share our lessons and spread the gospel, especially given fast urbanization rates. Secondly, what's challenging is the worldview conflicts. This also affects families. Professor mentioned this problem. Should we forego traditional thinking about family, about marriage, and should we succumb to the new trends, the modern trends? It seems like the Catholic Church and Christian understanding of the family is attractive and something that could provide solutions for these demographic problems. And thirdly, the elderly, the question of the elderly. We still don't realize what the problem is, how big it is at the level of our pastoral offer for the elderly. We should meet their needs, propose solutions. Italy are one step ahead of us. In Italy, Father Professor may confirm, he met the elderly who came to parishes to play cards. They would spend hours talking with each other, socializing in churches. We do not have and cannot put together an offer like that for the elderly, especially in villages. In cities, it may be a different story, but in cities, it's still lacking. There are more elderly people, and there will be more all around us, and they need to be accommodated. Fourth moral challenge to do with demographic change is something Father Professor has mentioned. Pew Research Center did research into religiosity, and here on the right, map of Europe showing a new category that we've been observing in Europe for years, or in the US for that matter. This is nuns, people who are not non-believers, but people who are indifferent to religion. Most secularized societies in this respect, societies where the number of people like that at the biggest is the Netherlands, 48% of people who are indifferent to religion. Not people who don't believe in God, but are indifferent. Norway, 40%, Sweden, Belgium, 38%. Secondly, these kind of societies of individuals indifferent to faith is related to what Father Rector mentioned, sexual revolution of 68. The impact of sexual revolution in Europe, Western Europe, is now visible, is now seen. And this late revolution will also impact Eastern Europe and Central Europe, because it is coming late but is moving fast in our part of Europe, in the East. So the sexual revolution and this society of people indifferent to religion, Well, it took a different direction in the United States. In the United States, 68% of people confirm that they pray every day. They pray every day. They practice their faith at least once a month. In Europe, it's 30%. 68% people in the US pray. 14% of people admit that they pray. 76% of people say they for sure believe in God. In Europe, 23% say they believe in God. In the light of demographical sciences, it may be a ray of hope, because even though European society has been affected by demographic changes, even though it has been affected by social revolution, sexual revolution, it might be heading a different direction than that which is standard. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Father Doctor, for this presentation pointing to differences, similarities between Italy and Poland. Also, thank you for pointing to ethical dilemmas, ethical challenges stemming from demographic changes of aging societies. And again, a provocative question. We spoke before on the topic. It wasn't addressed in your presentation, but one of the reasons for demographic changes that we see transpiring in Italy and now that we see in Poland is also adult men living with their mothers until 40 years old, until 50 years old, lack of maturity of a lot of men, lack of willingness to take responsibility for their own life and for their future family. And this seems to me to be also happening in Poland, looking at it, looking at age groups, age of people who enter marriage, either civil marriage or church marriage, and the average now is 30 years old. At the beginning of the 2000s, this was 21, 23 for women and men respectively, and the average age of entering marriage is increasing. Let's begin the discussion. I would like to thank all of our guests, all of our speakers for sticking to the time, being very brief, meeting the time requirements so that now we have the chance to discuss, to have a discussion. So I encourage the audience, like I said, to ask questions. But let me begin with a very simple question that I've already posed, but I'll say it again. When we're looking at the redefinition of family as a society, we profess certain values as Christians, both in Croatia, in Italy, also in Poland, and we see the recent data from the United States. We need to succumb to an imposed way of thinking of people who are in minority. And it's a question to all of you. Perhaps let's begin with Father Professor, because as I said, this space after the sexual revolution of '68, when we had something imposed on us as society by particular groups, social groups, we had to accept it in '68. And then, like I said, there was the Theology of Body by John Paul II that a lot of people welcomed happily. And they tried to live by these principles outlined by the Theology of the Body. But now we're coming back to the ideas from '68, which is being imposed on us.
Thank you very much. I will try to be short, as I was at the beginning, but I don't know if you have to cut me. In any case, I don't like to speak only about that '68 was a sexual revolution. This is, I would say, a very narrow vision. It was anthropological revolution, which is a completely different thing. Sexuality is part of it. But if we are just talking about sexual revolution, it's always like church is talking something, it has something against sexuality and so on and so on. That's not the way. Because I think that '68 started really a new, completely new vision on man. Based on what I said, not anything that would be behind, any substance, any substantial thinking. Everything is just a project. You are your own project. Okay, you belong to humankind, but you can do everything what you want to do. And that was in accordance with our society, individualization, progress, everybody is going to be free, there are no other challenges, and so on and so on. Now we see that is in crisis. So that's my point of view. Secondly, it's true that we develop also our teaching on marriage. I'm not expert in history or in moral theology, but talking about marriages, we needed a Council of Trent to define many things about, not only about sacramental life, but also about marriage, how to give a form to sacramental marriage. We know that many children were born out of marriage, even before, in the Middle Age, later on. But what we have in Europe today, that was, how to say, it was built up from 16th century until now, our own society, where the church and society fought together and against each other, and we build this culture of life, this culture of our societies. We build everything on the basis of that. As I said, 68 is complete. That's my understanding. It's a complete new revolution. Just one small picture. For example, today everybody's talking, we are non-binary. You can choose. But in my view, theologically, I said, my Bible is binary. Because Bible, I don't say it now, I'm not moralist, but as I said, if you see all images as man, women, man, women, man, women. So, and today, non-binary and binary. So then I said, okay, we should be able to change everything, but we don't want to do that. Okay, the question is how to do it. I cannot to say that. This is let's say, a cultural evolution, because if we saw the number in Italy of homosexual marriages, they're not so high in a year. I would say only 2,800. But we have such a fight in the society, as if there were 1,000 and 100,000 and 100,000 of those who are involved in homosexual marriages. But what we have today, what you see in the schools, and I see in Croatia even too, you have to start with sexual education in the early age. You're imposing that you don't have to say to children what their gender is, because everything is fluid. Parents don't have anything to say about it. This is what I said is a cultural revolution. For example, in many countries now, you can change your sex with 14 with not having approval by your parents. There is no need for a parent's approval for change your sex. That's far beyond, as I said, sexual revolution. It is completely cultural revolution that is going on. Because you want to create completely new understanding of men, of women, on the basis of that. Okay, my point is that it's not going to succeed. That is going to bring to the end of a cultural understanding of everything that we know. And that's my final remark. As theologian, as a priest, as a Christian, we shouldn't be so worried about these things, because I think in this time after Second Vatican II, the Church had three major strategies. One is strategy that I agree with what John Paul II said, non-negotiable values. Maybe the most important for me in this respect is veritatis splendor. It's clear saying what is our understanding and what we don't want to do. Okay, the question is, do we have good results with this? I don't know. I'm just asking. Okay, theologically, for me, it's good. But if we are talking about social strategies, that's the other point. I completely agree with Veritas Splendor, not because I'm afraid to say something different, but because more and more I'm convinced that it's a very prophetic document. Second strategy is so-called, we know, Benedict's option. Okay, what we should go to make, like Benedict, a monk, isolation from pray and many young priests want to do that, and let society go his way. And third is the option that Francis is trying to say. Okay, he said, okay, we tried everything, something's worked, something's not working, let's try something new. Let's try some new missionary and evangelical approach to all those issues. But that's I'm finished. When I see all of us here, as I said, what you said, Slavic countries, I don't know. Demography is really in Croatia. We are really on the verge of extinction. We are now less than 4 million. We were 30 years more than almost 5 million. And you see the society is aging. They're not young people. That's going to be a big problem. But we see there are young people in other parts of the world. Africa is future. In Uganda or other countries, these people with 60% of the people is younger than 16 years old. Our preoccupation should be to bring them gospel, understanding of life. We shouldn't be so worried about just what is going to be with us. Because, okay, that was in the history. Church came from Asia to Europe, then to Africa. So the church is going to grow. Okay, that's something that we have to think how to survive gospel and how to survive this vision of man. Not survive only, to be fruitful for all society, this vision of man, what is coming up from the gospel. What's going to be to Europe? We don't know. We don't have to give up, but now it's very hard to say. You mentioned something, and that's about United States of America. But I was reading newly that things are changing very quickly in States too. Young people are leaving the church. Many people is leaving the church. The Catholics were growing because of migration, but second, third generation, the situation is becoming the same like United States, in Europe. So, okay, maybe I didn't answer your question, but for me is that we have to define, to see what a kind of anthropology is going together with the gospel, what is coming out of the gospel in all different levels. And I would say that the fundamental thing is that men and women and union between them is fundamental for the understanding not only of society, but of gospel, our relation to God, and so on. And this is certainly going to survive. It cannot be beaten. It cannot be beaten. It can be beaten by homosexual, by different minorities, because that's the question of life. That's simply matter. Because another point, I was thinking, you know what? Our culture was thinking that we are able to overcome our biological conditions and that we can create completely new culture regardless of our biological conditions. But I think at the end that's impossible. That's impossible. But we are going to see on the high cost. And I'm positive. I really have hope. I say always, I'm not optimistic, but as a priest, I'm full of hope. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this positive. We can't hear the microphone. We are very. Thank you for this good and positive message that we don't have to fear the future of the union between man and woman. And two thoughts come to my mind. One from the yesterday's evening meeting, where we had a presentation from different groups of our Congress. And young people that were talking yesterday in the evening say there are more and more young people coming back to church. Yesterday in the evening, it resounded quite forcefully from the young people themselves. And the other thing that His Magnificence pointed out, if it comes to the upbringing in the area of sexual education from the very early years, in the area of understanding one's own sexuality, 2 or 3 articles were published last week on gender change in individuals, young individuals in Spain. It turned out that after 4 or 5 years, after the correction of the gender, many people were committed or trying to commit suicide. Many people say that it's a great thing that you may change actually your gender, but it turns out that after a few years, there are many suicides or suicide attempts. There are also many people trying to take legal actions against people who try to entice young people to change their sex. And now, a question to Professor Duda from the sociological and theological perspective to that matter. Thank you. So, listening to all this discussion, I was trying to come up with my own vision. Well, we could say that it's a kind of fashion, maybe, but I want to trivialize the discussion. So, this question is much more serious because the answer is tantamount to one word, that is identity. The statistics are usually objective, but how we interpret the same statistics may be translated into this vision of seeing either a half empty or half full glass. So, researching social issues, I always try to look for the reasons of certain phenomena. We know that today, knowing that we deal with diversity, mixed hybrid models of family life, derives from the attempt at looking for different values. Also, so this is a much deeper problem, cultural problem. It's a rebellion against the institution. Man tries to set himself free from certain ideas. It's the battle between the generations, between the young and the older generation. But does it mean that the behavior of the youth is somehow improper? No, it's rather searching. It's a process of searching. So we may reflect on what we do, how we communicate with them. So it turns out, as it was mentioned, that more and more young people would like to come back to church, but the question is how we perceive God, how we want to approach God, how we want to experience God. So is actually using digital media or attending mass online is the right answer? Just a dozen of years ago, listening to a mass on the radio was perceived as something improper. But what about today's perspective? The world around us is changing. In the past, we were taking walks, then we could go by car or horse. Today, we're flying. So we are looking for new ways of experience. maybe we just need to experience the moment of disagreeing with institutions, and maybe only then can we realize that not everything was bad in the past. Maybe we are looking of something that has already been there, but every generation needs to experience this process of searching. The contemporary generation of the young people is just searching. But searching for what? They are looking for the truth. At the very beginning of the Congress, we were talking that one of the aims is to look for the truth. So, what is the truth of perceiving family? People who should be treated as some kind of authority for children are sometimes preaching something else and doing something else. The number of suicide among children is increasing. For instance, in our Polish space, it was something. It was not a big problem in the past, but today more and more people are talking about it. If young people are not given certain guidelines on their way, then we may have problems in the adult life. So maybe someone at home was not talking to the children, and that's why we have problems with the attitude nowadays. I work in the area focusing on providing social help. So when we go to dysfunctional families, we can see that the main reason of a dysfunction in a family or the pathology is usually violence. But this is derived from the parents' dysfunction in the area of not being able to really provide appropriate care to children, to prepare them for the future life. It is not. This is not only the problem of religious awareness, but generally social awareness. I don't want to go into the realm of politics, but at the beginning of Christianity in Europe, those problems were attributable to the relation between the church and the authority, secular authority. Man, an older man and a younger man, is today looking for a haven, a safe haven. And we, as people belonging to the church, not only to the institution, we should look for the tools. And we have actually certain tools, both in Christ's time and today. This is the gospel. But everybody has to read it on their own and interpret it again. Even St. Paul has to find his own vocation. Teachers, also priests, educate children at school, but we interpret certain things in the family. If this is something that we lack, then we start talking about the third gender. I could be at lost, and then I may just ask myself, who am I? So my question is of course provocative. So talking about identity, we may get lost, but we still have certain power, force in ourselves, ourselves. Thank you.
Myślę, że
I think that all of us here, well, a person needs an identity, some specific identity. We want to stand out in the crowd, and the truth is a necessary step along the way to finding it, to be specific, to be different. So the same question from a moral perspective, I want to ask Father Doctor, and then we'll take the questions from the audience. We've been following the process in Rome with different ideas in mind and what is said about church. Father Rector mentioned it. Today, the center of church is no longer Europe. We can see it. And the problems we suffer from in Europe are not problems of people in Africa. For them, the question of identity, sexual identity is obvious. It is one of the hopes that we have for what we see all around. And secondly, a related note, what Benedict XVI said, our moral identity, our morality, isn't passed down generation to generation. You need to build your morality from ground up. Everybody has to do it. And it's hopeful. Young people who are now fascinated with particular ideologies, fashionable ideologies, societies moving in a particular direction. When people are born, when new people come to the world, they will be learning from ground up their morality. We've come to think that law is shaping the choices of people. If we ban something, if we impose restrictions, people will follow and they will be moral. We tend to believe that. But in reality, it's difficult to shape consciences, people's choices, so that they don't follow the law. That is in a particular way now, but it will change in the future. The law against abortion in Poland is stringent, but you may go to a pharmacy, to a chemist, and do chemical abortion, and it will be technically the same. Chemical abortion is really the same in terms of the effect to abortion in hospital. And this is the second hopeful note. We're learning morality from scratch. So there's hope in new generations. Thirdly, the problem that I've mentioned, the problem that cropped up, the question of migration will teach us morality anew. Confronting migrants, what we see in Europe now, will require us to ask the question as to who we are. And we're in Poland, looking at Germany, 18 million Catholics in Germany. We have over 30 million Catholics, people who declare to be Catholic. Are we hurt the same way as German Catholics? No, we don't have as much power as them. Thank you. Maybe we could use another panel or ask for some extra time, because, well, this important point to develop, the question of natural law and the question of earthly law, the right to live, the right of conscience, but let's leave it for now. Are there any questions from the audience? Father Dr. Philip Krause, so please could you pass the microphone? I wanted to thank Professor Kuczko. And it's regarding some other point. Professor Rusecki said that in theology we are in danger of fashions. I'm afraid, Professor, haven't we found ourselves on the wrong side of the conflict? Gender studies I first noticed it in Salisbury Library years ago, and I thought that gender studies were not about manipulating people. I thought they were studies about the fact that a woman has different norms, labor norms. There has to be social protection of women and minorities. But what Father Professor, I can understand that it translates into well, community centers and senior centers in villages. And I think that in its history, Church has always had a good offer for people. And the main accusation against Church, coming from various ideologies, is that if the Church is intolerant, the Church isn't empathetic. This isn't true. We saw a lot of dark clouds amassing, looming over us. I'm trying to be more in line with what Pope Francis and Benedict said. We're not a social welfare institution as a church, but what I think is brilliant is that in the studies on family are a combination of theory and practice. Church activities, remember Ms. Putasko, but it is not just repeating the ideas of conception until natural death, is not just repeating the same old truths about marriage. I think that in family studies, at such events like this, that we see a great spectrum also within a traditional family, that marriage is from honeymoon to separation, and the other way around, that marriage and family are not complete when a loved one dies. The war in Ukraine shows this is the case. When a child dies, when a spouse in a marriage dies, it is still a family. I want us to be aware that we don't be backed up in a corner. Fundamental theology had to be scientific, positivist, and it didn't serve anyone. We fought with a weapon constructed by our enemies. In family studies, we shouldn't fall into a trap. We shouldn't think that we are in a war with ideology. As church, we've always had a lot to offer. And the question of family is diverse. It's not just repeating the same old truths that family strong in God. It's about cultural empathy, being empathetic towards the new developments, demographic changes. And we can say that a child becomes a cost and not a resource, because in villages people had many children. Now people don't need as many children in cities. We should realize that. So I was inspired by Professor that we shouldn't forget. It's not about having a fight with the other ideology. We should be about showing our offer, showing the solutions Church had to offer, showing the empathy of the Church through love. Thank you. Thank you, Father, for the question. It's an important statement, and I think it's interesting. We shouldn't forcefully make ourselves similar to others and say sorry for sins we haven't committed. And thank you for this opinion. We have the strength, we have the tools, and gospel is our strength. I want to be brief, just one example. On discussion on the role and the place of pontificate universities in the world, late Father Grochowski was our guest at one time, and he did some reconnaissance. He wanted to open a new university in Bangkok, and they started thinking how this Christianity, Catholicism, how it would work in China, how they would be treated, entering a discourse, maybe stealing believers, converting people. Well, it was problematic, and he was invited by a university that was a neighboring university, actually, quite close, a Hindu university. And he shared his concern with the rector of this Hindu university. And he saw, well, amazement, surprise on the face of the rector of this university, and then an answer. The answer was, I don't understand your concerns. Your faith is your strength. And what the new university brings with it is its strength. Our strength is what we have to offer those who want to come and join us and study with us. Don't explain yourself to the world for being alive. Don't excuse your faith to the world, because the power of your faith will bring people, will attract people. If you are truthful and genuine, if you are in line with the truth. And the same goes for families and all the other problems we described today. We're often self-flagellate and nobody asks a question, why? Why are we doing it to ourselves? Let's call spade a spade. Let's point out the things which are evil objectively, but it doesn't mean all of us are bad. We do not adopt other people's sins. We're not responsible for other people's sins. We shouldn't be indifferent to other people's sins. We should draw conclusions. Thank you. So there is Christ, there is gospel, and we need to be, willing to live by it. Father Dean, please. Pro Dean, wanted me to ask a question, so that we can make it longer by 10 minutes, but no more. We want a break and then begin the next panel. However, I've got one question. There is a lot of youth here with us today. And if you put a query in the search box in Google, you can find 50-something different genders. A girl comes to university and then she says that she wants to be referred to with male pronouns because she doesn't identify as female, and she says she will sue us if we don't do it. One of the universities amassed professors. Professors were scared and they said that they will accommodate this girl because she would sue. A world-class biologist who is an atheist, Richard Dawkins, he came under criticism when he said that he knew as a biologist that there were 2 sexes and there were no 3 or 50 different sexes. All he had to do was look inside a cell. He said that as a biologist. So the question is, how can we stay sane? How can we withhold this pressure of political correctness and use our common sense? This needs to be the starting point, so that we stick to the definition of sex and definition of family. Family is a man and a woman and not 50-something genders. So is this question addressed to anyone in particular? Okay, whoever wants to answer it, please go ahead and answer it.
Theologian at all. The answer is not very easy to give. Okay, for me it's clear situation. I was asking myself as a rector, where is the line? We have to think about lines that we don't want to go further, or we don't go below that line. And that's something that we should also, it's true that it's not only moral question, it's also a political issue that we have to decide and to answer, all of us. But that shouldn't be only on the shoulders of a rector of a university or management of university. That should decide the church itself. Because I see that situation in local churches as different. You were talking about, I came last week, 2 weeks ago, I was in China, in Macau. You wouldn't believe, in Macau there is a Catholic university, University of St. Joseph. It's a small university, but it's unique. And now they want to create a Catholic university in Hong Kong. There are many Catholic universities in Thailand. It's interesting how they offer what we have to offer as a Christian and Catholics, about faith, about anthropology, but also being scientifically very good. But the other side, I met last week, on weekend, some people from Notre Dame University in States, and they fight a big fight because they said, we have already a small transgender community at our university. Okay, Notre Dame is considered not being among most conservative in the States, but also not being among most liberal Catholic universities in the States. You see, there are so many differences. But there is also a question, what is our common ground? I agree with you. That would be the line, not to go be saying, okay, that's our identity, and you know, we were starting with this point. But then there are many other practical issues, but maybe young people don't think about it. There is a political, there's financial issue. If you are independent on the state, that's always in Central Europe, that's a question of financing. Because state is financing sometimes our Catholic schools, Catholic university, and they say, oh, this is a common law. You can preserve your Catholic identity, but you have to obey some other rules. And the question is, what are we going to decide? That's true. I think that we should have a clear policy on that and say, that's our policy as a Catholic universities. We stick on that, and maybe to decide not to go this line, even despite that we have to maybe to disappear or not. Because I ask always myself as rector, where are the lines that we are not going further or beyond, or that's the point. I don't have clear answer, but if we say that is Christian anthropology, it doesn't mean that we don't have mercy toward these people. It doesn't mean that we don't want to talk to them. It doesn't mean that we don't want to help them. But if you come here and say, I will suit you if you don't do that, that is also a certain political statement, that somebody is coming already there, not open to see what you have to offer, but giving you a clear stance on that she or he wants to sue you. Okay, that's something that we really have to think about. So, thank you.
Dziękuję. Ja tylko dodam, że
Thank you. I just wanted to add that in terms of students of our university, everybody taking a university course signs a document about respecting the Catholic nature of our university. They have to sign that they agree that they accept the truth about human and human identity. And so let's pass the microphone to another person. Sorry, the translators cannot hear the question.
And I hear and I enjoyed a lot your presentations, because I can identify the same struggles in our tradition and in our country. The demographic decline, which is present in Romania, migration issue, this redefinition of the family, and we had in 2018 a referendum for the family in Romania, let's say by the initiative of the Orthodox Church, followed by the other Christian communities in Romania, but not all of them. And there was a struggle, the tentative to somehow to define or redefine the marriage within the constitution. And that referendum didn't pass because of the lack of representativity in the referendum. So now is my question, because we talk about the us and the others, I mean the church, gospel, and the secular world. How about the fact that within us, I mean in the Christian traditions, there are different opinions, as you saw in Romania? Because there are some churches, okay, Christian, no, because they didn't participate in the referendum, and they were against the referendum and against this definition of the family, as we have it in the gospel. And this is it's just a hypothesis. In the future ecumenical dialogues, till now we had these, let's say, theological issues as a topic of debate or discussion or dialogues. Probably in the future we'll have the moral issue as a topic of debate, because we are different on the different pages on the moral issue. What do you think will be in the future, I would say, a schism on this horizontal level which is trans-confessional, because we have different opinions in all the traditions, in the Orthodox tradition, in the Catholic tradition, as you saw in Germany, for instance. Okay, this is my question.
Benedykt XVI
So Benedict XVI talked about non-negotiables, non-negotiable values, values which need consensus of the entire society for them to be considered a fundamental basis. Right to live, right to freedom of conscience, right to bring up children the way parents want. We should add to what you've said. In Catholic Church, there are different ways of interpreting the teachings on one side of the Oder River, the border with Germany. There are different ideas on same single-sex partnerships, also divorces and divorcees and their life. And for us, the question stands: what is our conscience telling us? Pope Francis, on the other hand, says that if something may be value, something may not be a value, something may be so important that you devote your life to it, and something is not a value. And he says that the line dividing the two is not a result of talking with people of faith, but individual conscience. In our individual conscience, we should decide what matters. And this is more difficult because imposing somebody how they should act in penitence, when somebody is atoning for the sins, it may be easy to tell somebody what to do, but the person themselves need to make the choice, and it's more difficult. And I think the issues, the debates are ahead of us, and I think, well, a lot of time will go by until we conclude that within different denominations there are shared values. As Benedict XVI says, non-negotiable ones. Values that shouldn't be questioned, shouldn't be agreed between different denominations, shouldn't be regulated by law, changed by law. Because if we do not have non-negotiable values, our anthropology will crumble. It doesn't mean that in this chaotic world we should not help people resolve these issues in their consciences, help them make the right decisions in life, so that a human being can take responsibility for their decisions. And what Professor said, what we profess, what is the truth, is often combined with politics. And there was a question, to address the question. Ireland was forced to put up some questions to a vote, referendum, indicates of abortion, for example, until the result of a referendum was the way politicians wanted it. But here's the next question.
I am Janez Vudičar. I am coming from Slovenia, and Željko, you are lucky that you live in Croatia, because we have the same history. We were together, but it's such difference about these topics between Croatia and Slovenia. And to hear about these topics in Slovenia, it's terrible. And I suggest, I don't know, but I think the title is a little in a wrong way, because we should more speak about redefinition of identity of person, then, because the family is only results of this changing. And you know about, I started in our Catholic Salesian high school last year with Sarah. At the end it was Oscar, because between it was 18 years old. She was, now is he. And what can we do? Nothing, just accept. And so I think if we understand this changing of identity you talk about, we can come with this, Francis, a pastoral approach, because I work in pastoral catechetical field. We have this value of man. It's not important, women or man or I don't know what, but he is still God's child. And that's important in our society because you have no another possibility. And I'm afraid it will come also in Poland, in Croatia is still. But you know, Željko, just go to ask at your Catholic University Department of Psychology what you will find the definition of family. That's our faculty. We have also studies about this, and I know what is it. And what can we do? Of course, hope, and to understand why these young children, they are not youth, they are children, think about your gender and so on. Because in this society is this. And I think that it's better to start with understanding of human being today, identity and this thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Janis and myself, we know each other for many years and we share many common things, and there is no big difference between Croatia. Croatia's secularization is progressing very fast. Don't worry about that. We are more secular than many other Western countries. Don't worry, because I would say because Western countries, with all this respect, what we are talking, they had for many years that something that we called Christian secularized values for many years. And there was built on this common ground that I spoke about it. But communism changed completely our societies, around anthropology too. That was anthropological evolution, because when we are thinking about communism, okay, I will not talk about that, but that was a completely change of revolution. And then we didn't have in institution, we didn't have these secular values, so that secularization is progressing in former communist countries much faster than in Western countries. Because Western countries have to fight these ideas for 50 and more years. And then arrived to the same point where we did arrive in 20 years. So that's something that we have to think about. That's something, accepting what I said as a priest, as a God, we have to do it. But we have to explain them also something different. At least to try. Because if we completely accommodate, it's not that we are going to betray something, but we are going to lose a completely different approach to anthropology, because we don't have to forget that today's idea about this new identity is totalitarian one. At least we have to bring something different, at least to try, because what was said, we don't know what's going to happen in 30 years with these young kids who change genders. Because they are changing that now because they are influenced by all society, of media, saying that this is normal, that this is a solution to them. And the number of those people is growing. And nobody can convince me that this is pure anthropological issue. This is influenced by culture. But culture is changing. And who is coming to him in 20 years saying, when he says, I did a surgery and I cannot go back? It's not a problem to fight. It's not a problem to help. It's not a problem. But some things are irreversible. And today's society, even doctors are saying, okay, let's do it so easily. This is a crazy, this is a violence on the people. Even though he comes with 13 years, he says, I'm not anymore Sarah, I'm Oscar. But why wouldn't you say, take the break, let's go, let's see what's going on. But no, okay, tomorrow surgery, that's solution. That's something that we have to think. And other point, just finishing, that's the reason. I remember, I think there are some ideas here at Cool. We are, for example, a small university, smaller, much more smaller than Cool, but we have study of medicine. And we were attending in 2019 a conference in Vatican saying that the future of Catholic universities are going to be decided not only on the field of social sciences and humanities, but especially in the field of biomedicine. Because today, it's not the field of social sciences and humanities where we have most important ethical issues, but in the field of biomedicine. So we have to enter into those fields, because those fields are now the fields where we are solving so-called anthropological problems with surgery, with doctors, with psychiatrists, But we don't know results because we need time to know what's going on. And somebody, that's, I say always, and that's I'm finishing like that. You know what? We were using 30, 40 years some materials for building houses. And after 40 years, everybody was accepting asbest, we say Croatian, saying that's the best material. After 40 years, we see that this is a kind of bringing cancer. And we get rid of it. Because you need, everybody said that was scientifically proven at that moment. But when you talk about human personality, you need time to get, to be mature, to have time, to think about, yes, we help them, yes, we have to accompany them, yes, we have to accept them, but we don't have to say, okay, do whatever you want to do, everything's fine, go to the surgery, that's the best solution for you, and we have solved the problem. That's not the case. And that's, I think, it's the role of the church. Thank you.
Dziękuję. Trzy słowa.
So also a word or two, 3 sentences from Professor. So I'll be brief. As believers, are we brave enough to approach every individual with respect, what Father Rector has just mentioned? But are we also brave enough to be non-conformists? Today, perhaps, this is the role of believers, being respectful, but standing our ground. Jesus said, don't follow me. If you want to follow in my footsteps, you can. He gave us the choice, a free rein. But then, when Jesus was a teacher, following him wasn't popular. Perhaps today, the Catholic Church in the world we're living in today, in Europe, will have to play this role. The role which isn't condemning others, but being respectful. There is a doctor and there is a patient who says, I want to leave. Please make it possible for me. But I will ask a question. And I asked a doctor once, even myself, are you able to do it? Do you take full responsibility when a daughter, a son of somebody will come and asks you, how do you feel about what has been done? Will you be able to give a positive answer? Well, it's a procedure like any other operation, has a syringe, equipment, no difference to me. Are we brave enough to stand in the truth and to be non-conformists, people of faith? Perhaps today is a time for the church, because we're on the path and we need to stand our ground. Thank you. Dear all, I can see there are more questions. Unfortunately, we are behind schedule. We need to break. Father Professor Andrzej Pietrzak, who will be moderating the next session, is smiling at me. But the topic stays the same. Family in the face of modern challenges. So in the next panel to come, you'll be able to ask questions. I wanted to thank the panelists, Professor Małgorzata Duda, Father Żeliko Tanic, as well as Father Dean, Father Wojciech Kuczko. Thank you very much, and there is hope that things will be good, because we believe that the revealed truth about marriage, family, and a human being that we learn through Christ is the truth that is making us hopeful, and we will live by it. Thank you.